first full installment of The Destruction of America. In this episode, we are going to dive into the divisive topic of slavery. Over years, we have all heard stories about slavery, and we were taught lessons about slavery, of how we enslaved Africans, and the horrific incidents of slavery, the fight to free slaves, and so many other divisive topics that still anger people till today. Problem is, slavery has been over for 170 years, and yet we still bring up slavery. There isn't a person in America today that was a witness to slavery, that owned slaves, that was a slave. Are there people in America that are descendants of owners and of slaves? Yes, I'm quite certain there are quite a few. Here, I'm going to describe to you the truths, the facts, and the false narratives that have been presented to you as students, to people, divisive rhetoric that has been spread around about slavery. So we're going to dive in. Slavery in America came from what we call the Barbary slave trade. The Barbary slave trade existed from roughly 1500 to 1800. Started by the Barbary pirates. The Barbary pirates were Muslims that existed in northern Africa, western Africa, some of the islands around Africa, into Italy, and wreaked havoc for roughly 300 years in that area. They are what we commonly refer to as the beginning of what became the American slave trade, or slavery in America as we know it, of African Americans, or black people, as some will call them. Problem with slavery is slavery has been around for much longer than that. Slavery has existed in this world since the beginning of mankind. There are documented cases of slavery thousands of years old. We can look at Egypt, where Pharaoh enslaved his own people. We can look at China, Greece, Italy. We can look all over the Middle East and Asia and see that slavery has existed since the beginning of mankind. If you're a believer in the Bible, we know that believing in the Bible, that Pharaoh enslaved Hebrews long ago, close to the beginning of the Bible's mankind. And even today, in that same area, in the Middle East, Africa, slavery still exists. But I'm here to present some facts about our American slaves. So we know that Columbus discovered America in the mid-1400s. We know this. We also know that along with that, there were some slavery that came around. But what we're not being taught is that from the period that Columbus discovered America till the 1600s, there were no black people in America. There were no black slaves. In fact, there was only white slaves. Our own people were enslaved for many years before the first black man arrived here. And this occurred because of the Barbary slave trade. The Barbary slave trade, the Barbary pirates captured ships in the Mediterranean and the Atlantic, robbed them, looted them, and enslaved the people that were on those ships. They brought the people back to northern Africa and the islands and enslaved them in Africa, as they had enslaved the black people in Africa already, and kept them there for hundreds of years. The reason that it slowed down over there is because the Europeans, white people, went down there and started trading with the Barbary pirates. This helped release a lot of the Europeans that had been captured and were enslaved. This also brought about slavery that was black people. and they traded for them. This was a normal part of life back in the 15 and 1600s when this was occurring. Slave trade was big back then. It wasn't until 1619, an estimate, that the first black slaves arrived in America, and they arrived on Dutch trading ships. They were brought here to try something new. And in fact, the first registered slave owner occurred in 1620 by the name of Josh Johnson. Oh, sorry. Actually, the first registered slave owner was actually in 1620, 1 year after the first black slaves had arrived here. His name was Anthony Johnson. He was a freed slave from Africa, and he was black. He was the first slave owner in America. And up until that time, white slaves were all over. In fact, they estimate upwards of 50,000 white people were enslaved in America. That's a large number for this time. So we're going to get into a few facts about slavery. First, the biggest common misconception is white people started it. We did not. In fact, it began in the Middle East and Africa. We can either look to Pharaoh when he enslaved people to build the pyramids. We can look to the Muslims who had a long history of enslaving people and still until this day enslave people now. So that's the biggest misconception, that it's white people. It's not. Every race of color and creed of human that came to America at some point in time was enslaved. The Polish, the Germans, the Italians, the Irish, some of the Dutch, all came over here and all experienced periods of enslavement. But they were released because they fought for their freedom, or because of the arrival of more black people. It's sad, but that's partially true. I personally believe, and research have found out, that it wasn't necessarily the fact that black people were black that led to their enslavement. It was because they were available. It was cheap trade with Africa. They could go over there with a ship and give Africans a small amount of money, and they would load the European ships up with African slaves. The other common misconception is we were just this gigantic plethora of slave owners in America. In fact, we were not. At the highest point in time of slave ownership in America, it's estimated that 30% of the total population of America owned slaves. At the highest. That's not a very large number. It is to some extent, but yet it's not. At the same time, 10% of the Africans that were over here were also slave owners. So they enslaved their own people, as white people enslaved their own people. It's all over. Everybody owned slaves at some point in time. Not the total populations, but every color of person, every race of person has ties to slavery of some sort, by my estimates. We also have to look at the fact that they believe that there was a revolving door of slaves coming over from Africa to the United States. But again, there was an estimate of 600,000 total slaves came to America, which is only 5% of the total Africans that were actually taken into slavery, most of which landed in the Caribbean islands and South America. So there's this narratives that white people are appalling because of this, and the facts just don't support this. Here's other facts. The Civil War, we all know, was a fight between the North and South, or Republicans and Democrats. It was a fight over the idea that slaves should be free. In that war, 600,000 white people died fighting to free slaves. That is just as many that died in the few years of the Civil War as the complete total population of slaves that came from Africa to our country. We also know, and facts will show us, that even the Native American population owned a large, significant amount of African slaves. They were outlawed from commingling with them, and a lot of laws similar to what the white man imposed over the 250-year period of slavery allowed in America. So our cultures were very similar at that point in time. And it's a sad situation. We weren't as bright and intelligent and about mankind as we are today 300, 400, 500 years ago. Luckily, we're done with slavery today. A couple other issues that come along with this. Obviously, as I said, the white man fought to free the slaves. America has the shortest period of slavery amongst all countries that had slavery going on. We're at 250 years that we had slavery in America of African Americans. Before that, like I said, it was white people, so longer if you include the white people in the mix. Whereas during the Barbary trade, 300 years of enslaving Africans, just on the Barbary trade. But if we look at the overall history, slavery still exists in Africa and the Middle East. But everyone wants to blame the white man for this. The problem is, it's not the white man's fault. The white man fought for freedom. The white man ensured slavery would end here. It took the Europeans 300 years before they went and attempted to end the Barbary slave trade, which led to many wars with the Muslim population over there. The Nation of Islam fought against it because that's who owned and controlled all these African slaves. They still do today. So we ask, how does this affect me today? Well, to be brutally honest, it doesn't. Slavery doesn't exist in America in the form that it did back then. Are there repercussions because of slavery? Yes, there's a lot of anger. There's still sex trafficking going on, and people being sold as sex slaves from other countries. But in general, they're not being sold based on race, color, creed, or religion. They're being sold now because they're available. So the narrative that we need to eliminate now is the fact that this is a white man's problem that he caused, because white people did not cause it. This creates this huge racial divide. Black folks want to blame white people, and white people nowadays just don't want to fight against it and say, hey, the facts don't support your argument. This helps to destroy America. We can't unite because there's a generation of people that still believe slavery is a problem when we know it's not. We know the white man fought to end it. We know the white man created laws to help fight discrimination and racism and the hatred that this is built up. And now in the media again, we're seeing slavery brought up. You owe my relatives for hundreds of years of slavery. When in fact, it was the black man that enslaved the white man first. We just took after that and brought them over here eventually, after we had enslaved our own people. I mean, overall, it's ridiculous. I mean, the overwhelming majority of slaves have been owned by their own people. If we look at numbers, the estimates are that the Barbary slave trade enslaved 1.5 million Europeans, or white people as we call them today, whereas white people enslaved 600,000 black people. So, I mean, the numbers don't add up to the narrative that's out there. We have one of the most amazing countries to live in, where slavery has been gone for a very long time. People need to get over it. People need to understand that slavery was ended in 1864, or 1865, but 160, 70 years ago. It's done. It's over with. If we keep finding people that are angry about this situation, we're never going to be able to heal. We're never going to be able to come together. If we continue to let people push this false narrative that the white man is responsible for all of these bad actions, instead of owning up to what the truth and the reality is, we are never going to get over this divide. It is one of the many elements that are helping to destroy America. It needs to stop. Our country is strong. Our country is brave. Our country has fought to give everything equally to everybody. Has it worked? 100% no. Is it getting better? If people would stop pointing the finger about the past, it would be better. It needs to end. We need to come together. We need the truth. I have read for many years about this situation, researched. I can find over 200 sources that can back up what I'm telling you today. I hope you take it to heart. I hope you understand it. And I hope you have the courage and the knowledge to go look this up and find it out and stop the attacks. So, coming up, I'll be having a joint podcast with my friends at Forrest and Friends. It's going to be a joint session based on racism. I'm going to be leading the discussion. We will have a dual podcast here for the destruction of America, and we will have one posted for Forrest and Friends. I encourage you to keep watching. I encourage you to follow. I encourage you to speak your mind. If you would like to discuss any of the issues that we brought up today, I'm open, I'm free, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Let's open a dialogue. Let's get the situation fixed and get the facts straight. Thank you for watching, and I will be back.